Spanning nearly 250 miles and ranging from 7 to 20 feet deep, the Tiber River has been in existence for many centuries. According to some research, the river is 17,000 years old. That means the Tiber existed during the Ice Age. It is one of the top 3 longest rivers in Italy, flowing from its source in the Apennine mountain range through Rome to its mouth at the Tyrrhenian Sea. This is the story of the Tiber River, its source, its many landforms, its cities and bridges, its uses and problems, and its connection to the great city of Rome. The Tiber was named after Tiberino, a descendant of Aeneas who drowned in the Tiber's waters. Aeneas was a Trojan hero and the son of Prince Anchises and the goddess Aphrodite. The Tiber River originates in a beech tree forest over 4,000 feet above sea level in the Apennine Mountains, from 2 springs 33 feet away from each other on Mount Fumaiolo. These springs have been named Le Vene del Tevere. During the 1930s, Benito Mussolini put an antique Roman marble column at the point where the river arises. Notice the Roman eagle standing on top of the marble column and 3 wolf heads holding a ring in their mouths on the sides. The column is inscribed, Qui nasce il fiume, sacro ai destini di Roma, which translated in English means, Here is born the river, sacred to the destinies of Rome. This is where the Tiber River begins. Sandbars, islands, oxbow lakes, and meanders are some of the many landforms shaped by the Tiber River. Sandbars are commonly seen in the Tiber River. As the water flows, it carries a heavy load of sediment, that's rocks, sand, and silt, that has been pushed along by the Tiber's current. After water has picked up and carried a lot of sediment, it becomes too heavy and the river is forced to drop its weighty load. This is called deposition. When deposition builds up, it forms a sandbar jutting out into the river full of sediment and sand. Islands in the Tiber, like Isola Tiberina or Tiber Island, are formed when the river hits an elevated bit of land and wants to flow over it. However, rivers can only go downhill, right? So the river goes around it. The water splits in two at that point, then meets back together again. The elevated point is now surrounded on all sides by water, and what do we call a bit of land surrounded by water like that? An island. Meanders in the Tiber are formed when the river starts to flow slower and more sideways, but still downhill. The river flows slower because it is wider and the land is less steep. Also, erosion is happening on the outside part of the meander. Erosion is the wearing away of rock or earth by wind, water, or glaciers. In this river's case, it would be by glaciers during the Ice Age and water throughout history. On the inside part of the meander, deposition is happening. The river drops its load of sediment on the inside of the meander and erodes more space for the water on opposite sides of the river at the same time. This forms sharper and sharper meanders and sometimes forming oxbow lakes. The Tiber River also has one formed oxbow lake and one almost formed oxbow lake. Oxbow lakes are basically meanders cut off. Erosion happens so much that the river meets together, and then deposition fills in the parts where the old meander meets the river, leaving a lake, an oxbow lake. In Italian history, the Tiber River has been a popular spot for people to settle on because it provides plenty of natural resources. Some cities the Tiber flows through are Rome, Tiber, Ostia, Fiumicino, Vatican City, Perugia, Emilia-Romagna, Valtiberina, Umbria, and many more. To get to the other side of the river and to build more of a city, bridges had to be built. There are numerous modern bridges used to cross the Tiber today, but several ancient bridges, mostly just for walking, still remain. 3 of the most known are Ponte Sant'Angelo Bridge, the Milvian Bridge, and the Fabricius Bridge. The Tiber River has many uses, but it also has some problems too. Let's start with the uses. Roman history tells us that the Tiber River was used as a significant trade route. This caused many people to settle on the banks of the Tiber. For centuries, the Tiber has provided Italian people plenty of water for drinking, fishing, bathing, washing clothes, sewers, and communication by boat. By the way, did you know that the sewers in Rome were big enough for a horse and cart to drive through? The Tiber River was also a natural border between towns and cities. Before Rome was founded, the river served as a boundary between the lands of the Etruscans, Sabines, and Latins. Although the Tiber River was a significant natural resource, it presented a few problems for the people who settled along its banks. The river tended to flood a lot in the ancient Roman times. Flood markers were placed to tag how high the water flooded on that day. The oldest recorded flood of Rome was on February 2nd, 1230. Looking at old documents, flood plaques, etchings, and other historical resources, we can tell that 122 flood plaques have been hung up in memory of floods, the last one being in 1937. Floods were frequent back then for two reasons. First, there was a lack of walls along the riverbank. Secondly, the riverbed had an irregular width. Today, 39-foot-tall walls on the banks of the Tiber prevent floods in Rome. Without the Tiber River, Rome may never have existed. I told you about how lots of towns were founded on the Tiber. Rome was one of those towns. You've heard about the greatness of Rome, how the planets were named after Roman gods, how Romans were conquering other cities, how most words have Latin roots. Well, none of that amazing Roman history would exist if it weren't for the Tiber River. Even the legend of the founding of Rome had the Tiber playing a vital role. According to Destination 360, Roman legend declares that Rome was founded in the year 753 BC on the banks of the Tiber near Ostia. The story of the founding of Rome states that Remus and Romulus, two infant brothers, were abandoned on the waters between the ancient center of Rome and the island Isola Tiberina. They were rescued and ultimately saved by a wolf. Later, the two brothers would murder their great-uncle who had done the same to their father. A dispute ended in Romulus killing his brother Remus, and the name of the city was officially established. Whether or not the history of the Tiber River actually ever included two human beings named Remus and Romulus is up for speculation. What is for certain is the exceedingly significant role that the history of the Tiber River has had in the terms of the development of Rome. Rome was also a very clean city. Why? Remember how I mentioned that the sewers were big enough for a horse and cart to drive through? Rome had large sewers that flowed into the Tiber. But not everyone loved the Roman sewers. Criminals were thrown into the Tiber or the sewers as punishment. Today, you can enjoy a dinner or sightseeing cruise along the Tiber in Rome and take in some of the most beautiful coastal sights along the city's shores. Start out at Ponte Sant'Angelo dock and enjoy a leisurely journey down the Tiber toward Isola Tiberina, Ponte del Risorgimento, and the Borghese Gardens. The history of the Tiber River is in many ways the history of Rome itself. We have seen the Tiber River's history, beginning from a spring in the mountains, flowing through cities of Italy, shaping a variety of landforms, and finally reaching the Tyrrhenian Sea. The third longest river in Italy has seen cities rise up along it and bridges built across it. Its uses and problems have created an interesting story for several Italian cities, and it has served as a natural resource for many people, including the great Roman Empire. Overall, the Tiber River is an interesting, inspiring, and magnificent river.